Moses, the narrative part 1, the rise of a prophet, the river's hope. My life began as a secret, a whisper against Pharaoh's decree to drown the sons of the Hebrews. To save me, my mother wove a basket of reeds, an ark of hope she placed in the Nile. I was found by Pharaoh's daughter and raised as a prince of Egypt, a Hebrew child in a gilded cage. I learned the ways of power, yet my heart heard the whispers from the slave pits. This duality tore at me, a constant, silent war between the world that claimed me and the blood that defined me. One day, seeing a taskmaster beat a kinsman, a fire ignited in me. I struck the Egyptian down and buried my princely future in the sand. A fugitive, I fled into the desert of Midian. There I became a shepherd, a husband, and a father, and for a time I believed my old life was truly buried, the unburning flame. But God had another path for me. On the slopes of Mount Horeb, I saw a bush that burned but was not consumed. From this unburning flame, God called my name. He had heard the cries of his people in Egypt, and he was sending me, a stammering shepherd, to be their deliverer. Fear seized me. Who was I to challenge a king? Who was I to lead a nation? I was a man of no account, with a hesitant tongue. But God's presence was like the fire itself, undeniable and all-consuming. He brushed aside my excuses and armed me with his own divine name. I am who I am. He commanded me to return to the land I had fled and stand before the most powerful man in the world, the serpent and the staff. My shepherd's staff became the rod of God's power. With my brother Aaron as my voice, I stood before Pharaoh and delivered God's command, "Let my people go." Pharaoh laughed and his heart was hardened. As a sign, I cast down my staff and it became a serpent. But even when it devoured the serpents of his court magicians, he would not yield. It was a contest of wills, the stubborn pride of a human god against the unstoppable will of the Creator. And so began the methodical dismantling of Egypt's confidence in power. The 10 Sorrows. God sent me to dismantle Egypt's world, plague by plague. The Nile turned to blood. Frogs, gnats, and flies became a living torment. Disease struck their livestock, and agonizing boils afflicted their bodies. Hail of fire shattered the land, and locusts devoured what remained. A profound darkness smothered the sun, a blindness that could be felt. With every sorrow, Pharaoh would bargain and break his promise. It was a battle for the soul of Egypt, and each plague was a chisel chipping away at the granite of his pride. Finally, God announced one last dreadful plague. On the night of the Passover, every family in Israel marked their door with the blood of a lamb. That night, the angel of death passed over those homes but struck down the firstborn son in every Egyptian household. A great cry of anguish rose from Egypt, and Pharaoh, broken by grief, thrust us out into the night, a nation set free by a terrible sorrow. Part 2, the wilderness journey, the echo of freedom. Pharaoh's grief quickly turned to rage. He pursued us with his army, trapping us against the shores of the Red Sea. Before us, an impassable water. Behind us, the chariots of a vengeful king. But God commanded me to lift my staff, and a great wind parted the sea, creating a dry path between two walls of water. The roar of the wind was deafening, yet there was a sacred silence in that corridor of the sea. The ground beneath our feet was miraculously dry, a path of impossibility carved through the heart of the deep. When the last Israelite was safe, the Egyptians charged in after us. I lowered my staff, and the sea crashed down upon them, swallowing the might of Egypt in a final thunderous roar. On the far shore, we were no longer just escaped slaves. We were a people saved by the hand of God, the mountain and the law. In the heart of the desert, we came to Mount Sinai, its peak shrouded in fire and cloud. The people trembled below as I went up alone into the storm to meet with God. For 40 days, I was in his presence, receiving the 10 Commandments and the laws that would shape us into a nation. A blueprint for a just and holy life, a covenant between our people and their Creator, etched in stone by his own finger, the golden betrayal. But while I received the law above, the people's faith faltered below. Fearing I was lost, they pressured Aaron to build them a god they could see. He forged a golden calf, and they worshipped it with wild revelry. When I descended the mountain with the stone tablets, my heart broke at the sight. The laws of holiness and justice in my hands felt like a mockery in the face of the golden beast below. They had traded the promise of a kingdom of priests for the fleeting ecstasy of a pagan feast. In my grief and fury, I smashed the tablets on the ground, for the covenant was already broken by their betrayal, the long wander. For their faithlessness, an entire generation was condemned to wander until their bones rested in the sand. For 40 years, the wilderness was our home and our crucible. It was a time of testing and learning, sustained by water from a rock and miraculous manna from heaven. I walked with them every step, bearing their complaints, settling their disputes, and pleading for them before God. I was their judge, their intercessor, and at times their lonely burden bearer, watching a generation of slaves slowly give way to a nation of free men. Day by day, year by year, the desert did its work, humbling the proud and strengthening the weak, until a new generation was ready to inherit the promise, the bitter water. Near the end of our wandering, the people thirsted and cried out once more. God told me to simply speak to a rock, and it would give them water. But my spirit was worn raw by 40 years of their rebellion. In a flash of anger, I struck the rock twice with my staff. Water gushed forth, but I had acted in my own fury, not in faith. For this moment of disobedience, for failing to honor God before the people, my own sentence was passed. I would lead the people to the edge of the promised land, but I would not be allowed to enter. A glimpse and a final breath. From the top of Mount Nebo, God showed me the culmination of our long journey. I saw the entire expanse of the promised land, a place of green hills, flowing rivers, and future homes. I saw the inheritance of the children of those I had led from slavery. My eyes saw its glory, but my feet would not walk its paths. My work was finished. My own feet would not cross the Jordan, but the nation I had carried on my shoulders soon would. It was a bittersweet peace, a fulfillment of the mission, even at the cost of the prize. Joshua, a faithful leader, would take them in. The man who was once a prince of Egypt would die alone on a mountain. The man slow of speech had become the voice of God. My life was a paradox, but it was complete. Here, in sight of their future, my journey ended. The Lord, who walked with me in fire and cloud, was with me in my final breath. And in the land of Moab, he laid me to rest. My story woven into the fabric of the people I had led to the very edge of everything.